Good wishes to all of you. Democratic Politics 2, Textbook in Political Science for Class 10, Chapter 2, Federalism. Overview. In the previous chapter, we noted that vertical division of power among different levels of government is one of the major forms of power sharing in modern democracies. In this chapter, we focus on this form of power sharing. It is most commonly referred to as federalism. We begin by describing federalism in general terms. The rest of the chapter tries to understand the theory and practice of federalism in India. A discussion of the federal constitution provisions is followed by an analysis of the policies and politics that has strengthened federalism in practice. Towards the end of the chapter, we turn to the local government, a new and third tier of Indian federalism. What is federalism? Let us go back to the contrast between Belgium and Sri Lanka that we saw in the last chapter. You would recall that one of the key changes made in the constitution of Belgium was to reduce the power of the central government and to give these powers to the regional governments. Regional governments existed in Belgium even earlier. They had their roles and powers, but all these powers were given to these governments and could be withdrawn by the central government. The change that took place in 1993 was that the regional governments were given constitutional powers that were no longer dependent on the central government. Thus, Belgium shifted from a unitary to a federal form of government. Sri Lanka continues to be, for all practical purposes, a unitary system where the national government has all the powers. Tamil leaders want Sri Lanka to become a federal system. Federalism is a system of government in which the power is divided between a central authority and various constituent units of the country. Usually, a federation has two levels of government. One is the government for the entire country that is usually responsible for a few subjects of common national interest. The others are governments at the level of provinces or states that look after much of the day-to-day administering of their state. Both these levels of governments enjoy their power independent of the other. Take a look at this map. Source: Montreal and Kingston, Handbook of Federal Countries 2002, Amsagil Queen's University Press 2002. Federal Politics Systems: Canada, United States of America, Mexico, Aztec Kitts and Nevis, Venezuela, Pacific Ocean, Micronesia, Argentina, Brazil, Atlantic Ocean, South Africa, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Belgium, Switzerland, Spain, Germany, Australia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Herzegovina, Pakistan, United Arab Emirates, Comoros, Indian Ocean, Malaysia, Australia, Pacific Ocean, India, Pakistan, Russia. Though only 25 of the world's 193 countries have federal politics systems, their citizens make up 40% of the world's population. Most of the large countries of the world are federations. Can you notice an exception to this rule in this map? In this sense, federations are contrasted with unitary governments under the unitary system. Either there is only one level of government or the subunits are subordinate to the central government. The central government can pass on orders to the provincial or the local government. But in a federal system, the central government cannot order the state government to do something. State government has powers of its own for which it is not answerable to the central government. Both these governments are separately answerable to the people. Let us look at some of the key features of federalism. There are two or more levels or tiers of government. Different tiers of government govern the same citizens, but each tier has its own jurisdiction in specific matters of legislation, taxation, and administration. The jurisdictions of the respective levels or types of government are specified in the constitution, so the extent and authority of each tier of government is constitutionally guaranteed. The fundamental provisions of the constitution cannot be unilaterally changed by one level of government. Such changes require the consent of both the levels of government. Courts have the power to interrupt the constitution and the power of different levels of government. The highest court acts as an umpire if disputes arise between different levels of government in the exercise of their respective powers. Sources of revenue for each level of government are clearly specified to ensure its financial autonomy. The federal system thus has dual objects to safeguard and promote unity of the country, while at the same time accommodate regional diversity. Therefore, two aspects are crucial for the institutions and practice of federalism. Governments at different levels should agree to some rules of power sharing. They should also trust that each would abide by its part of the agreement. An ideal federal system has both aspects, mutual trust and agreement to live together. If federalism works only in big countries, why did Belgium adopt it? The exact balance of power between the central and the state government varies from one federation to another. This balance depends mainly on the historic context in which the federation was formed. There are two kinds of routes through which federations have been formed. The first route involves independent states coming together on their own to form a bigger unit, so that the pooling sovereignty and retaining identity they can increase their security. This type of coming together federations include the USA, Switzerland, and Australia. In the first category of federations, all the constitution states usually have equal power and are strong vis-a-vis the federal government. The second route is where a large country decides to divide its power between the constituent states and the national government. India, Spain, and Belgium are examples of this kind of holding together federations. In this second category, the central government tends to be more powerful vis-a-vis the states. Very often, different constituent units of the federation have unequal power. Some units are granted special powers. Jurisdiction, the area over which someone has legal authority. The area may be defined in terms of geographical boundaries or in terms of certain kinds of subjects. Some Nepali citizens were discussing the proposals on the adoption of federalism in their new constitution. This is what some of them said. Kagras, I don't like federalism. It would lead to reservation of seats for different caste groups as in India. Sarita, ours is not a very big country. We don't need federalism. Babulal, I am hopeful that the Terai areas will get more autonomy if they get their own state government. Ram Ganesh, I feel federalism because it will mean that powers that were earlier enjoyed by the king will now be exercised by our elected representatives. If you were participating in this conversation, what would be your response to each of these? Which of these reflects a wrong understanding of what federalism is? What makes India a federal country? Take a look at this cartoon. Isn't that strange? Did our constitution makers not know about federalism, or did they wish to avoid talking about it? What makes India a federal country? We have earlier seen how small countries like Belgium and Sri Lanka face so many problems of balancing diversity. What about a vast country like India with so many languages, religions, and regions? What are the power sharing arrangements in our country? Let us begin with the constitution. India has emerged as an independent nation after a painful and bloody partition. Soon after independence, several princely states became a part of the country. The constitution declared India as a union of states, although it did not use the word federation. The India Union is based on the principles of federalism. Let us go back to the seven features of federalism mentioned above. We can see that all these features apply to the provisions of the Indian Constitution. The Constitution originally provided for a two-tier system of government, the union government, or what we call the central government, representing the Union of India and the state governments. Later, a third tier of federalism was added in the form of panchayats and municipalities. As in any federation, these different tiers enjoy separate jurisdiction. The Constitution clearly provides a threefold distribution of legislative powers between the Union government and the state government. Thus, it contains three lists. Union list includes subjects of national importance such as defense of the country, foreign affairs, banking, communications, and currency. They are included in this list because we need a uniform policy on these matters throughout the country. The Union government alone can make laws relating to the subjects mentioned in the Union list. State list contains subjects of state and local importance such as police, trade, commerce, agriculture, and irrigation. The state governments alone can make law relating to the subjects mentioned in the state list. Take a look at this cartoon. If agriculture and commerce are state subjects, why do we have ministers of agriculture and commerce in the union cabinet? Concurrent list includes subjects of common interest to both the union government as well as the state governments such as education, forest, trade unions, marriage, adoption, and succession. Both the union as well as the state government can make laws on the subject mentioned in this list. If their laws conflict with each other, the law made by the union government will prevail. What about subjects that do not fall in any of the three lists, or subjects like computer software that came up after the constitution was made? According to our constitution, the union government has the power to legislate on these residuary subjects. We noted above that most federations that are formed by holding together do not give equal power to its constituent units. Thus, all states in the Indian Union do not have identical powers. Some states enjoy a special status. Jammu and Kashmir has its own constitution. Many provisions of the India Constitution are not applicable to this state without the approval of the State Assembly. Indians who are not permanent residents of this state cannot buy land or house here. Similar special provisions exist for some other states of India as well. There are some units of the Indian Union which enjoys very little power. There are these are areas which are too small to become an independent state but which could not be merged with any of the existing states. These areas like Chandigarh or Lakshadweep or the capital city of Delhi are called union territories. These territories do not have the powers of a state. The central government has special powers in running these areas. The sharing of power between the union government and the state government is basic to the structure of the constitution. It is not easy to make changes to this power sharing arrangement. The parliament cannot on its own change this arrangement, and change to it has to be first passed by both the houses of parliament with at least two-thirds majority. Then it has to be ratified by the legislators of at least half of the total states. The judiciary plays an important role in overseeing the implementation of constitutional provisions and procedures. In case of any dispute about the divisions of powers, the High Courts on and the Supreme Court make a decision. The union and state governments have the power to raise the resources by levying taxes in order to carry on the government and the responsibilities assigned to each of them. Listen to One Nation and One Regional News Bulletin broadcast by All India Radio daily for 1 week. Make a list of new items related to government policies or decisions by classifying these into the following categories: news items that relate only to the central government, news items that relate only to your or any other state government, news items about the relationship between the central and state governments. Pokhran, the place where India conducted its nuclear tests, lies in Rajasthan. Suppose the government of Rajasthan was opposed to the central government's nuclear policy, could it prevent the government of India from conducting the nuclear tests? Suppose the government of Sikkim plans to introduce new textbooks in its schools, but the union government does not like the style and content of the new textbooks. In that case, does the state government need to take permission from the union government before these textbooks can be launched? Suppose the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and Orissa have different policies on how their state police should respond to the next slides. Can the Prime Minister of India intervene and pass an order that all the chief ministers will have to obey? Take a look at this map. India in 1947. How is federalism practiced? Constitutional provisions are necessary for the success of federalism, but these are not sufficient. If the federal experiment has succeeded in India, it is not merely because of the clearly laid out constitutional provisions. The real success of federalism in India can be attributed to the nature of democratic politics in our country. This ensured that the spirit of federalism, respect for diversity, and desire for living together became shared ideas in our country. Let us look at some of the major ways in which this happened. Linguistic states. The creation of linguistic states was the first and a major test for democratic politics in our country. If you look at the political map of India, when it began its journey as a democracy in 1947 and that of 2017, you will be surprised by the extent of the exchanges. Many old states have vanished and many new states have been created. Areas, boundaries, and names of the states have been changed. In 1947, the boundaries of several old states of India were changed in order to create new states. This was done to ensure that people who spoke the same language lived in the same states. Some states were created not on the basis of language but to recognize differences based on culture, ethnicity, or geography. Inside includes these include states like Nagaland, Uttarakhand, and Jharkhand. Take a look at this map. Has your village, town, city remained under the same state since independence? If not, what was the name of the earlier state? Can you identify name of three states in 1947 that have been changed later? Identify any three states which have been carved out of bigger stones. Use Hindi. Why Hindi? Why not Bangla or Telugu? Glossary. Coalition government. A government formed by the coming together of at least two political parties, usually partners in a coalition form of political alliance, and adopt a common program. When the demand for the formation of states on the basis of language was raised, some national leaders feared that it would lead to the disintegration of the country. The central government resisted linguistic states for some time, but the experience has shown that the formation of linguistic states has actually made the country more united. It has also made administration easier. Language policy. A second test for Indian federation is the language policy. Our constitution did not give the status of national language to any one language. Hindi was identified as the official language, but Hindi is the mother tongue of only about 40% of Indians. Therefore, there were many safeguards to protect other languages besides Hindi. There are 21 other languages recognized as scheduled languages by the Constitution. A candidate in an examination conducted for the central government positions may opt to take the examination in any of these languages. States to have their own official languages. Much of the government work takes place in the official language of the concerned state. Unlike Sri Lanka, the leaders of our country adopted a very cautious attitude in spreading the use of Hindi. According to the constitution, the use of English for official purposes was to stop in 1965. However, many non-Hindi speaking states demand that the use of English continue. In Tamil Nadu, this movement took a violent form. The central government responded by agreeing to continue the use of English along with Hindi for official purposes. Many critics think that the solution favored the English speaking alike promotion of Hindi. Promotion of Hindi continues to be the official policy of the Government of India. Promotion does not mean that the central government can impose Hindi on states where people speak a different language. The flexibility shown by Indian political leaders helped our country avoid the kind of situation that Sri Lanka finds itself in. Center state relations. Restructuring the city states relations is one more way in which federalism has been strengthened in practice. How the constitutional arrangements for sharing power work in reality depends to a large extent on how the ruling parties and leaders follow these arrangements. For a long time, the same party ruled both at the center and in most of the states. This means that the state governments did not exercise their rights as autonomous federal units. As and when the ruling party at the state level was different, the powers that ruled at the central tried to undermine the power of the states. In those days, the central government would often misuse the constitution to dismiss the state governments that were controlled by rival parties. This undermined the spirit of federalism. All this changes significantly after 1980. This period saw the rise of regional political parties in many states of the country. This was also the beginning of the era of coalition governments at the central since center. Since no single party got a clear majority in the Lok Sabha, the major national parties had to enter into an alliance with many parties, including several regional practices, to form a government at the center. This led to a new culture of power sharing and respect for the autonomy of state government. This term was supported by a major judgment of the Supreme Court that made it difficult for the central government to discuss the state government in an arbitrary manner. Thus, federal power sharing is more effectively today than it was in the early years after the constitution came into force. Are you suggestions that religionism is good for our democracy? Are you serious? The state played for more powers of the states. Coalition government. Here are two cartoons showing the relationship between create and states, center and states. Should the state go to the center with a beginning goal? How can the leaders of a coalition keep the partners of government satisfied? Linguistic diversity of India. How many languages do we have in India? The answer depends on how one counts it. The latest information that we have is from the Census of India held in 2011. This census recorded more than 1300 distinct languages which people mentioned as their mother tongues. These languages were grouped together under some major languages, for example, languages like Bhojpuri, Magdi, Bundelkhandi, Chhattisgarhi, Rajasthani, and many others were grouped together under Hindi. Even after this grouping, the census found 121 major languages. Of these, 22 languages are now included in the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution and are therefore called scheduled languages. Others are called non-scheduled languages. In terms of languages, India is perhaps the most diverse country in the world. A look at the enclosed table makes it clear that no one language is the mother tongue of the majority of our population. The largest language, Hindi, is the mother tongue of only about 44% Indians. If we add to that all those who knew Hindi as their second or third language, the total number was still less than 50% in 2011. As for English, only 0.02% Indians recorded it as their mother tongue. Under 11% knew it as a second or third language. Read this table carefully, but you need not memorize it. Just do the following. Make a bar or pie chart on the basis of the information. Prepare a map of linguistic diversity of India by shading the region where each of these languages is spoken on the map of India. Find out about any three languages that are spoken in India but are not included in this table. Scheduled languages of India. Language proportion of speakers in percent. Assamese 1.26%, Bengali 8.03%, Bodo 0.12, Dogri 0.21, Gujarati 4.58, Hindi 43.63, Kannada 3.61, Kashmiri 0.56, Konkani 0.19, Maithili 1.12, Malayalam 2.88, Manipuri 0.15, Marathi 6.86, Nepali 0.24, Odia 3.10, Punjabi 2.74, Sanskrit none, Santali 0.61, Sindhi 0.23, Tamil 5.70, Telugu 6.70, Urdu 4.19. N stand for negligible. Read the following excerpts from an article by noted historian Ramachandra Guha that appeared in the Times of India on November 1, 2006. The report of the States Recognition Reorganization Commission SRC was implemented exactly 50 years ago on November 1, 1956. This, in its own time and own way, has also transformed the political and institutional life of the nation. Gandhi and other leaders promised their followers that when freedom came, the new nation would be based on a new set of provinces, these based on the principles of language. However, when India was finally freed in 1947, it was also divided. Partition was the consequence of a primordial attachment to one's faith. How many more partitions would that other primordial loyalty language lead to? So ran the thinking of Nehru, Patel, and Rajaji. Far from undermining Indian unity, linguistic states have helped strengthen it. It has proved to be perfectly consistent to be Kannadiga and Indian, Bengali and Indian, Tamil and Indian, Gujarati and Indian. To be sure, these states based on language sometimes quarrel with one another. While these disputes are not pretty, they could in fact have been far worse. It is the formation of linguistic states that has allowed India to escape what might have been a worse fate still. If the sentiments of the native speakers of Telugu, Marathi, etc., all had been disregarded, what we might have here was one language, 14 or 15 nations. Take the example of your own state or any other state that was affected by linguistic reorganization. Write a short note for or against the argument given by the author here on the basis of that example. Decentralization in India. So, we are lucky 3-tier coach in a train. I always prefer the lower bed. We noted above that federal governments have two or more tiers of governments. We have so far discussed the two tiers of government in our country. But a vast country like India cannot be run only through these two tiers. States in India are as large as independent countries of Europe. In terms of population, Uttar Pradesh is bigger than Russia. Maharashtra is about as big as Germany. Many of these states are internally very diverse. There is thus a need for power sharing within these states. Federal power sharing in India needs another tier of government below that of the state governments. This is the rationale for decentralization of power. This resulted in a third tier of government called local government. When power is taken away from central and state governments and given to local government, it is called decentralization. The basic idea behind decentralization is that there are a large number of problems and issues which are best settled at the local level. People have better knowledge of problems in their localities. They also have better ideas on where to spend money and how to manage things more efficiently. Besides, at the local level, it is possible for the people to directly participate in decision making. This helps to inculcate a habit of democratic participation. Local government is the best way to realize one important principle of democracy, namely local self government. The need for decentralization was recognized in our constitution. Since then, there have been several attempts to decentralize power to the level of villages and towns. Panchayats in villages and municipalities in urban areas were set up in all the states, but these were directly under the control of state governments. Elections to these local governments were not held regularly. Local governments did not have any powers or resources of their own. Thus, there was very little decentralization in effective terms. A major step towards decentralization was taken in 1992. The constitution was amended to make the third tier of democracy more powerful and effective. Now it is constantly mandatory to hold regular elections to local government bodies. Seats are reserved in the elected bodies and the executive heads of these institutions for the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes. At least one third of all positions are reserved for women. An independent institution called the State Election Commission has been created in each state to conduct panchayat and municipal elections. The state governments are required to share some powers and revenue with the local government bodies. The nature of sharing varies from state to state. Rural local government is popularly known by the name Panchayati Raj. Each village or a group of villages in some states has a Gram Panchayat. This is a council consisting of several ward members, often called Panch, and a president or Sarpanch. They are directly elected by all the adult population living in that ward or village. This is the decision making body for the entire village. The panchayat works under the overall supervision of the Gram Sabha. All the voters in the village are its members. It has to meet at least twice or thrice in a year to approve the annual budget of the Gram Panchayat and to review the performance of the Gram Panchayat. The local government structure goes right up to the district level. A few Gram Panchayatis are grouped together to form what is usually called a Panchayat Samiti or block or mandal. The members of this representative body are elected by all the Panchayat members in that area. All the Panchayat Samitis or mandals in a district together constitute the Jilla District Parishad. Most members of the Jilla Parishad are elected. Members of the Lok Sabha and MLAs of that district and some other officials of other district level bodies are also its members. Jilla Parishad chairperson is the political head of the Jilla Parishad. Similarly, local government bodies exist for urban areas as well. Municipalities are set up in towns. Big cities are constituted into municipal corporations. Both municipalities and municipal corporations are controlled by elected bodies consisting of people's representatives. Municipal chairperson is the political head of the municipality. In a municipal corporation, such an officer is called the mayor. Prime Minister runs the country, Chief Minister runs the state. Logically, then the chairperson of Jilla Parishad should run the district. Why doesn't the DM or collector administer the district? What do these newspaper clippings have to say about efforts of decentralization in India? For arrest 250 justice in a village bill. Women pradhans bring winds of change. Democracy for sale in TN. Highest bidders get panchayat posts. States oppose direct funding of panchayats. Over 1 million women elected to panchayats. An experiment in Brazil. A city called Porto Alegre in Brazil has carried out an extraordinary experiment in combining Decentralization with participative democracy. The city has set up a parallel organization operating alongside the municipal council, enabling local inhabitants to take real decisions for their city. The nearly 13 lakh people in this city get to participate in making the budget for their own city. The city is divided into many sectors or what we call wards. Each sector has a meeting like that of the Gram Sabha in which anyone living in that area can participate. There are some meetings to discuss issues that affect the entire city and citizens of the city can participate in those meetings. The budget of the city is discussed in these meetings. The proposals are put to the municipality that takes a final decision about it. About 20,000 people participate in this decision making exercise every year. This method has ensured that the money cannot be spent only for the benefit of the colonies which rich people live. Buses now run to the poor colonies and builders cannot evict slum dwellers without resettling them. In our own country, a similar experiment has taken place in some areas in Kerala. Ordinary people have participated in making a plan for the development of their locality. This new system of local government is the largest experiment in democracy conducted anywhere in the world. There are now about 36 lakh elected representatives in the panchayats and municipalities, etc., all over the country. This number is bigger than the population of many countries in the world. Constitutional status for local governments has helped on deepen democracy in our country. It has also increased women's representation and voice in our democracy. At the same time, there are many difficulties while elections are held regularly and enthusiastically. Gram Sabhas are not held regularly. Most state governments have not transferred significant powers to the local governments, nor have they given advocate resources. We are thus still a long way from realizing the ideal of self government. Find out about the local government in the village or town you live in. If you live in a village, find out the names of the following your panch or ward member, your sarpanch, your panchayat samiti, the chairperson of your Jilla Parishad. Also find out when did the last meeting of the Gram Sabha take place and how many people took part in that. If you live in urban areas, find out the name of your municipal councillor and the municipal chairperson or mayor. Also find out about the budget of your municipal corporation, municipality and the major items on which money was spent. Exercises. Look at the following states on a blank outline political map of India: Manipur, Sikkim, Chhattisgarh, and Goa. Identify and share three federal countries other than India on a blank outline political map of the world. Point out one feature in the practice of federalism in India that is similar to and one feature that is different from that of Belgium. What is the main difference between a federal form of government and a unitary one? Explain with an example. State any two differences between the local government before and after the constitutional amendment in 1992. Fill in the blanks. Since the United States is a dash type of federation, all the constant states have equal powers and states are dash vis-a-vis the federal government. But India is a dash type of federation and some states has more power than others. In India, the dash government has more powers. Here are three reactions to the language policy followed in India. Give an argument and an example to support any of these positions. Sangeeta, the policy of accommodation has strengthened national unity. Urban language based states have divided us by making everyone conscious of their language. Harish, this policy has only helped to consolidate the dominance of English over all other languages. The distinguishing feature of a federal government is national government gives some powers to the provincial governments. Power is distributed among the legislative, executive, and judiciary. Elected officials exercise supreme powers in the government. Government power is divided between different levels of government. A few subjects in various lists of the Indian constitutions are given here. Group them under the union, state and concurrent lists as provided in the table below. Defense, police, agriculture, education, banking, forests, communications, trade, marriages. Union list, state list, concurrent list. Examine the following pairs that give the level of government in India and the powers of the government at that level to make laws on the subjects mentioned against each. Which of the following pairs is not correctly matched? State government, central government, central and state governments, local governments, state list, union list, concurrent list, residuary powers. Match list 1 and list 2 and select the correct answer using the codes given below the list. List 1 Union of India State Municipal Corporation Gram Panchayat. List 2 Prime Minister Sarpanch Governor Mayor. Consider the following two statements. In a federation, the powers of the federal and provincial governments are clearly democratic. India is a federation because the powers of the union and state governments are specified in the constitution and they have exclusive jurisdiction on their respective subjects. Sri Lanka is a federation because the country is divided into provinces. India is no longer a federation because some powers of the statements have been developed to the local government bodies. Which of the statements given above are correct? Okay, thank you.